Hello and welcome to the Supernatural Fandom Track here at ConTinual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and today we're going to be talking about fear in the dark, the fear in Supernatural. But before we dive into the topic, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Justine.
Hi, I'm Justine Mastin. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, as well as a yoga teacher, podcaster, and writer. And I have a new book out, Starship Therapies, Using Therapeutic Fan Fiction to Rewrite Your Life, available wherever books are sold.
Nice. Smoothly done. Very well done. Travis Langley.
I am Travis Langley, at Superheroologist on Twitter, best known as the author of the book Batman in Psychology, A Dark and Stormy Night, editor and head nerd of the herd on a dozen other books. Most relevant to this one, Supernatural Psychology, Roads Less Traveled.
Nice.
Yeah, folks, a couple of folks here have contributed to it. Actually, we have quite a few people who've contributed to that.
And Travis Adams.
Hi, my name is Travis Adams. I'm a social worker. I work for the Veterans Center in San Diego. I'm also a Marine Corps veteran, and I use pop culture to work with my clients to help with post-traumatic stress disorder mainly.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic fantasy, urban fantasy, near future, post-apocalyptic stories, and more. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But one thing's true of all the modern settings, they're places that Sam and Dean could walk into and feel right at home. So the whole series of Supernatural, of course, being a horror-based series, is based on fear, the characters' fear, our fears. But we start with John Winchester and his fear of the demon that killed Mary. And we're never quite sure whether he is afraid of Sam or for Sam. But that certainly colors his actions. And we also, I don't think, ever find out exactly when he found out about the demon blood. But it certainly does change his decision-making once he knows. So what's your thought or headcanon on John's fears? Starting with Justine.
Ooh, this is such a good question, and not one I've really considered. I mean, when I think of John's worst fears, I think I think social emotional. You know, he's afraid of connecting because you know what happened to Mary, and we can only speculate what he saw in Vietnam, and so I'm gonna come out saying that he's not afraid of Sammy. He's afraid for Sammy.
Okay.
That's my feel.
And we also know when the kids were little, at least, he was also afraid of having Child Protection Services take them away. So he was afraid of losing them one way or the other.
Right.
Travis Langley?
He's afraid of loss because he's got this history from throughout his life. And while we've got the core loss of Mary driving the whole hunt for him, but you know he's grown up with loss. His dad just disappeared once upon a time. And other losses throughout life, losses of comrades in arms or brothers in arms, and so there is this distant quality to him. And of course, he's also got your classic He-Man, stereotype that he's always felt the need to live up to. So he's never been one to open up a lot in the first place. So the fear of connecting to others, some of it grows out of those masculine stereotypes, the masculine gender role he's always felt the need to live up to. And it's part of his personality. And the fear of connecting is involved with the fear of loss. And so he ends up not connecting even with his own kids out of habit for the way, he doesn't know. All kinds of people have had parents who don't know how to connect. And it's a common thing in stories for it to be dads in particular, because that is all kinds of folks say, yeah, I never heard my dad do such and such. So the fear of Sammy, I think we see some glimpses of fear of Sammy, even as their fear for Sammy in that. He also wants Dean to be ready to. There is this self-destructive quality. It's like we've all got to be ready to destroy ourselves for the greater good.
Yeah. Well taken.
Yeah, I think that's a huge theme throughout the whole series is like fear of letting everybody else down. And I agree with both what Justine and Travis said. And thinking about it and rewatching some episodes because I just always have it on in the background. If I can't pick a new show, let's go Supernatural too. It's a solid one. But I'd mentioned when we were talking before this, Everybody Loves Clowns. And in that episode, John had just died the episode before. And Sam is telling Dean that he hasn't processed it. When Dean's like, no, I understand. You haven't. And he kind of calls him out. And you see how Sam admits it by the end of the episode. And I think that's when you can see, like, looking at John's actions, that he was scared of him and for him. And Sam realizes kind of how he lost that. And I think that plays a role later for his story about losing connection and why he even connects more, maybe because he realizes that he didn't have that connection with his father. And it plays into his character much more later.
Yeah, I think those are all excellent points. And I think that John, being a product of his times, also never learned communication skills. He never certainly learned them from his father, who disappeared when he was very young. Of course, he never knew until perhaps the Lebanon episode that Henry died saving his grandkids. We don't know what happened to John's mother and whether she coped in healthy ways or not. She's a Winchester after all, even if
I'll vote not.
Probably not. Yeah, probably not. And so he's never really learned to communicate on top of the societal expectations and cultural gender norms of the time. So he had a lot going against him for normal parenting, let alone, and I've got this kid with demon blood. Now what do I do? So yeah, I think that fear of loss of control also, and loss of being one in charge. He withheld information a lot because it kept him in charge. And he really couldn't let go of that control, even when his sons were obviously adults and skilled at what they did. And that not only pushed them away, but it put them in danger, even though he claimed to be trying to protect them, because he withheld that information largely out of fear. Mm-hmm. So I think John's fears kind of lay some of the groundwork for everything else that comes after. Mm-hmm. Now we get to a very rich topic, and that is Dean's fears. This could be a whole panel by itself. And Dean owns up to that in his more aware moments. And he gets shoved face first into it by various visions, demons, and other entities. So let's talk about what scares Dean.
Planes. Airplanes.
Airplanes. Oh, yeah.
They fall out of the sky.
Yeah. Airplanes fall out. Clowns don't fall out of the sky.
Right.
It's true.
They can in Supernatural.
They can.
If clowns fell out of the sky, you probably don't have to worry about them anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, he's afraid of losing Sammy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of his biggest fears, and letting people down.
Oh,
like he has to hold all the pain so that nobody else has to suffer. He needs to do that. And if he sees other people suffering, that eats at him. And you have all those, like, all that guilt and shame for the things that he's done. When he thinks about being a torturer in hell and how that impacts him. When he thinks about being a demon and drinking with Crowley and fighting people, those things torment him because he let people down.
And just the simple real world issue we've talked before about Dean's parentification and how common it is for the oldest kid to be put in some parental positions just by the sheer mechanics of being the older one. It's like, okay, you two go wash the dishes, but keep an eye on your younger brother, make sure he's really washing them. That simple thing, which is a practical aspect of life. More extreme considering how often the two kids are left while dad is gone off on the road. It's a wonder social services didn't butt into their lives more frequently, just on how often those kids were left to themselves. And so these things were put on Dean, not just to make sure some things got done for that practical aspect, but he became aware early of the need to try to let his younger brother be a kid.
Mm-hmm.
That was important to him early on. The things he's protecting, Sam from. It's like, okay, let's let Sam have that cereal. Just the simple little things of looking out for Sam to help Sam feel like a kid, to feel some of the things that Dean remembers mom. Dean knew what when she got destroyed, and not that he'd have understood what was going on then, but Sam grew up, mom was always gone, and dad and Dean had their routine, and some of that always include trying to protect Sam from the world.
Mm-hmm.
One, and I mentioned this on a few episodes back, is if we think about the episode, I think it's All Hell Breaks Loose, maybe towards the end of season 5, Dean and Bobby are talking about Sam and him making that decision to try to like let Lucifer in and beat him. And he's like, that kid's been running in the building since we were 9 years old. We've been trying to protect him, but during that time, he became a man.
Mm.
He runs in the face of fear, which I think is something that a lot of us don't even think about, like the basis of fear. Like, where does it come from? What does it do for us?
And I was going to say that
No.
same episode, Bobby asks, what are you afraid of, losing or losing your brother?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for them, it's kind of both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, this has been so fun to listen to both of you, because what comes up for me is Dean really is afraid of anyone turning out like him, having to suffer like him.
He's
Right.
Batman.
He's Batman.
And now he is Batman too, which is great.
Oh, get me a fan. Oh, yeah, but
that
he's...
is revenge is definitely in there on an issue with hunting for the demon and all, especially with Dad. But Dean, like that Bat guy I've written about, they are driven more by the need to keep others from going through what they've personally experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And Dean's that applies to his brother Sam. He's trying to keep his brother Sam from suffering some of the things he has. But anybody, Dean wants to keep them from going through what he experienced, or if they have gone through some of that kind of loss, he wants to try to deal with that and help them somehow manage a normal life beyond that if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When he loses his two father figures, so John and Bobby, he does react violently because of the way it comes out. Sam has that coming to terms moment, and he walks away when Sam realizes that he's doing too little too late, and Dean is rebuilding the baby, and then he just bashes the hell out of the trunk. And then when Bobby's dying on death's door, he punches that glass next to that doctor's head. He's like, I'm the guy who does his job, now you do yours. Because he holds those people to a standard, and he doesn't want to lose those individuals.
Makes me think of Star Wars. What's Yoda's line? Fear leads to anger, anger leads to something, and that leads to the dark side.
Hate.
Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to the dark side.
Oh, fear's not in there.
Yeah, but fear, well, it leads with fear. Fear is an adaptive mechanism, though, and it exists for a reason. To be afraid to run out among the pack of wolves, to be, afraid to fall off the cliff. It says it serves a function. Now, in this modern world, we don't encounter the same kind of things that were in the world when these fear mechanisms were evolved in the brain. And so they still exist in us. And we can end up applying them in situations that don't exactly make sense. It's like, why are you afraid of this? Because part of me is going to be afraid of something. And it's like, well, this is the thing that I've learned to, have that part of the brain focus on.
And Travis, I want to come back to what you said about fear a little earlier, and that is fear works differently in warriors and first responders. It's there, but these are guys who, like Sam, they run into burning buildings, literally. That's their job. They choose to do that, unless you're talking about people who are conscripted. So how does fear work with, it's a rational response, like Travis said, but here are people who choose to go places reasonable people are afraid to go for a purpose. Where does fear work in there?
There's so much that goes with it because it is a survival response, right? And then that triggers our amygdala to drop some chemicals in our body. And then that triggers like a fight, flight, freeze response. And first responders, service members, hunters, it's no matter which way your body wants to go, whether it's fight, flight, or freeze, they get retrained and have to go against their natural urges to freeze maybe, or to flee. I've had a Marine Corps veteran I worked with be like, I'm the break glass in case emergency guy. Like, if you need help, I'm running towards the trauma. I'm running towards what's going on, just like first responders do. And it's the training and the training and the training that kind of gets us to move past that. And that's why the trainings do become so intense. And it comes down to like this cognitive behavioral triangle. So we have our body dumping these chemicals that's telling our body to do something behaviorally. And we have these thoughts and our feelings. Our feelings, we're scared, our body's dumping something, and we're going to do something different. We have to do something different. We have to run towards it. And it becomes almost addicting sometimes, because when you get that release of fear, like when you're done with that event, you get that dopamine drop that just gives you that pleasure chemical, and you have that bonding experience.
And there are people who don't feel fear the same way. We all have our different experiences with it and different ways of relating. People who are high in sensation-seeking qualities, they need the adrenaline rush. Some of them will seek some fear-inducing situations to get that adrenaline, because parts of the brain are understimulated, and so they're seeking. They can find, some people can be very destructive with these sorts of things. Some will be psychopathic, but some that they take this and find something useful to channel it into, such as the firefighter.
Yeah. So I mean, there are people who will jump off a perfectly good bridge with a bungee cord just for the fun of it.
I've done it twice. I'll never do that again.
Oof.
I jumped out of an airplane once. That was it for me.
Yeah. But kind of like what Travis was talking about, it is like a natural thing, and we do have these different adaptive things and different fears, whether it becomes something emotionally or physically, and then if it turns into a phobia, which is where it's more of like, instead of just like a common reaction to heights or public speaking, where it becomes like an issue within yourself and an issue with life. And it becomes hindrance.
Now, before we get back to Sam and Dean, I have one more general fear question here, and that is, in a way, Sam and Dean grew up not in a regular war zone, but in a shadow war zone, like people who were in Beirut during the Civil War, a long-time occupation, a constant danger over years. What does that do to people's fear response when the bombs never stop falling? There is no foreseeable end to the conflict, and they're stuck in the middle.
Yeah. It's interesting what can happen for folks who have experienced trauma like that, where we're almost not afraid of the stuff we should be afraid of. I've worked with folks who had constant traumatic experiences growing up, and what they're afraid of is the sound of dad's ice clinking in his glass. Ice clinking in a glass, they're out of there. But walking down a dark alley, nothing bad ever happened to me in a dark alley. I've got no associations there. And so sort of ironically, you know, folks who have experienced trauma are almost more vulnerable to experiencing it again because they're not looking for danger where danger should be.
Interesting. And you know, bring that back to the boys.
Mm-hmm.
When every day is beheading vamps or chasing werewolves or banishing wraiths, like you said, what's a dark alley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It does change like a baseline for your experience. And then that's when you go for like those addicting high risk behaviors just to feel alive again. And, you know, people who working with a lot of trauma, I see a lot of people who had tough lives and they volunteer for the military service to put themselves in more of a harm's way and for that family connection. And they think it's what's going to help them, and it ends up like harming them more long term.
Yeah. So coming back to Dean, we mentioned that he's afraid of Sam being hurt, but he's also afraid of Sam leaving him constantly. He's got this tremendous fear of abandonment. He's afraid of being alone. He's afraid of losing his family, whether that's John and Sam, or Bobby and Sam, or just Sam, or later Mary. So that colors a lot of the show, is his fear. Sam even calls him on it about, you didn't keep me here because you wanted to save my life. You couldn't stand being alone. And there's some truth in what Sam says, although we know how much Dean loves him. Thoughts on that? Go ahead and jump in. Okay, Justine?
Yeah, he is. He's so desperately afraid of being alone. And he does for others what they can do for themselves, which, to put it harshly, kind of takes away their dignity and keeps them owing to him, right? If he keeps taking care of Sammy and he does everything for Sammy, Sammy never needs to learn how to be a grown-up, and Sammy will never leave him. Which, I mean, he didn't do maliciously. He was also a child. But he kind of continued this over time. Like, I'll do it. I'll be the one. I will do for others what they can do for themselves so that they will always need me.
Which we usually associate with women in bad marriages who do that to keep their children tethered to them instead of giving them the ability to grow up and roots and wings, you know.
Mm-hmm.